in case you're not familiar with our leadership system, into where does this conversation sit in the system? So what you see here is this is our top-down, bottom-up framework for how we help businesses evolve. And we call it ACE, and ACE stands for Align, Change, and Empower. So we're making sure that the organization is aligned, typically with the executive team. Secondly, then we're enabling the middle parts of the organization to cascade change and execution. And then thirdly, the empowerment, which needs to go all through the organization. We need to get all three of these things working in the proper sequence to unlock performance. And that's how we systemize leadership development. So 1, 2, and 3. Today's conversation, if you click into each of these boxes, today's conversation really sits in the empowerment area of the leadership system. So for those who are just joining us, what you see on the screen is the leadership system. And almost like when you walk into the shopping mall and you see that red dot that says you are here. So this is where today's conversation sits in the leadership system. So customer acumen is one of many capabilities that we build with our clients as we empower current and future leaders. So with that said, glad you're with us, and we'll kick off with a bit of a question, actually. So this word customer acumen, what you said was it's about understanding your customer. That is the massive response. Inside there's a few other things as well, but primarily you've told us it's about understanding your customer. Our definition, to build on that understanding, is applying a commercial understanding of your customer's business to better prepare, align, and communicate the value of your product or service. So it's that commercial aspect, adding that commercial aspect to your understanding that perhaps differentiates how we think about customer acumen. So I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves. We're going to really get some perspectives on this topic today. I'll have them introduce themselves in the order that you see them here. So Gavin, if you want to kick us off.
Thanks, Eric. So hi, everybody. I'm Gavin Lipperman. I'm the leader for enterprise business for Cisco, Australia and New Zealand. Thanks for having me today.
Hi there, I'm Chris Avramopoulos. I'm the EGM here at Cleanaway, responsible for customers, pretty simply.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Eric. My name's Terence Peters. I'm currently doing some consulting in all things sales enablement, sales excellence, and my background for the last 30 years has mainly been in healthcare, but at the moment doing a fair bit of work with the Dulux Group outside of my comfort zone. So thank you.
Thanks, Terence. It's so good to have you as one of our sales effectiveness partners. Really glad you're here. I think it's a lot for you to add today. So
thanks, sir.
Thrilled to have all three of you. And I'm also going to introduce my co-facilitator, have him introduce himself. Ben, you want to say hello?
Thanks, Eric. Hi everyone. Ben Lever. So background, a big background in banking. So in banking, a lot of exposure to and leadership of exactly today's topic, which I was able to then take to a couple of other places, including more recently working with Eric and the Lighthouse team with their clients, and including Gavin and Chris, who are with us today. So good to see both of you, and good to see everyone on board. We're looking forward to the hour.
Thanks all. So what we've been doing in the background for the last month or so is trying to identify what are some of the most common and most important shifts that customer acumen enables, right? So we've identified three. So we'll take just a moment. We're going to unpack these three shifts, and then we're going to get our panel to discuss them. So the first shift is really around that customer value proposition. And this may not be new, but I think it is quite nuanced in terms of how we do this. So moving from this features and benefits situation, or just describing what the product does, to describing the value and unlocking the value with the customer. And in our experience, this is as much about how we think about things and how we articulate with the customer the value that it provides their business. And again, going back to our definition of customer acumen, it's that particular economic value that we want to encourage our sales teams to be able to describe. What's the economic value that the CFO would appreciate, right? Or the chief procurement officer of the product or service that we're offering. The second shift is this mindset shift. So perhaps you're going from I view myself as a salesperson, and I'm in business to business sales. What we're trying to explore today is moving to a space of trusted business partner, and perhaps moving to a business for business, so that we get everyone winning in the equation, helping your business succeed by creating value for your customer. So we want to explore that mindset shift that's pretty relevant in many pockets of our organizations. And then third and finally, and this is really interesting, the role of services in sales. And so classically, it's helping services organizations or functions move from, we're going to deliver the contracted services, we're going to pick up the phone. Perhaps if you're in professional services, I'm going to manage my account, to more of a sales mindset, not throwing away the service, which then might say, I'm here to identify opportunities to add value. So we're going to explore those three through a conversation. So I will now hand over to my colleague, Ben, and he's going to walk us with our panel through this conversation. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so I'm going to go through the three shifts, and I'm going to do that by first going to one of our individuals on the panel and asking a question about each of those shifts. But we'd love to hear some questions from everyone else as we go through. So hopefully my questions are the fire starter, and we'll get everyone else involved from there. So I'm going to start with Gavin talking about customer value proposition, Gavin. And that question is, to kick us off, so Cisco, in the midst of a very significant shift towards software and renewals away from a hardware selling business, how would you describe selling by value compared to selling by price and product? And a secondary part to that question maybe is how's that shift playing out at the moment within your sales teams?
Yep, that's a good question. And just a quick check, you can hear me okay now because I switched.
Absolutely, you're all good to go.
I was trying beta stuff. So thanks for the question, and thanks for, if you missed out, thanks for inviting me as well to the session. I think there's a few things there. If I take a few minutes, the first one is the shift from hardware to software and services. What that really does is it actually just makes us more accountable, because in the olden days, when we sold hardware, you'd have this big sort of approach to a traditional project, and everyone would scale up to a $50 million project or whatever it is, and then it would be a sort of set and forget. And I'm generalizing, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, you have another big project. I think that the fact that we've put ourselves into the software, recurring software and services, it means you're on the hook every day, and it really means that a customer can actually switch it off tomorrow if they want. So now all of a sudden it's about, am I actually adding value every day? So when I get to the end of the week, like, did I add value? Is it worth it? Did the customer get what they paid for? Have we actually implemented in a fast time? Have they got results? So that's sort of probably the big thing from sort of hardware to software. On software also, the models are different. So the way we build models, financial models, CapEx models, OpEx models, all of that has to be very different. And we really need to understand where we're trying to land. Otherwise, we can get into the wrong space, because giving a customer a saving in year 4 and 5, if it's enormous, but they want the saving in year 1, if there's a misalignment, then you're not going to go anywhere. I think the big thing that we're also doing is I'm not going to say reskilling, but just ironing out the edges with the account managers, and trying to reach out as far as you can. So it's like trying to correct your swimming stroke. So with a customer, think about the customer's customer. So the whole time is outside in thinking. So what is the impact of this for my customer and for my customer's customer, all the way right through to the edge? And I was just doing some new hire training introduction, and my biggest advice is to the new hires is forget about Cisco for the first while and go and see your customer and learn as much as you can about your customer, because then you'll be speaking their language. So that means, annual financial reports, KPIs, understanding, but have that sort of EQ as well, because you can't just arrive at a customer and go, hey, please tell me about your KPIs, or it doesn't really work like that. You have to have those subtleties. You have to have the EQ. So the financial business acumen is important, and the EQ is also important. I've got some examples, but maybe just hand back to you, when you're coming back, I can give you some examples of where the team have actually seen how they've shifted the language as well.
I'll come back to you very shortly on that, but you've hit a couple of really interesting keywords there that I think, firstly, I'd like to ask Chris about before we throw open to everyone else. One was accountability. I think that's a word that we may not have expected to come out in a conversation like this, but it's a really, really important one. And accountability back to your customer is how you build that trust, to be honest. We all talk about trusted advisor and those sort of things, and having accountability back to your customers is a great way to build that. And the other one was alignment and aligning to what those values and strategic priorities of the business are. So, Chris, I think accountability would be something that resonates really well for you in the Cleanaway business, as well as getting to know your customer's customer, which I think was another really good keyword there that came out from Gavin. So your customer's customers and accountability within your own teams would be really important.
Yeah, 100%, Ben. Interesting word in terms of accountability, and the way I describe that, and through my many years of experience, you can pretty easily identify the people that are performing and the ones that aren't performing, right? That's a pretty easy sort of split. Where it becomes a bit challenging is, how do you connect with your people to say, this is what good performance looks like, this is what excellent performance looks like, and this is what outstanding performance looks like. And too often what we've seen in terms of the maturity of our sales leaders is they can do the first part of that really, really easily, but having those conversations around, the differentiated levels of good performance, they can be tough conversations for people. And sometimes, given the nature of challenges for individual sales reps, there's nuances to that. There's not one size that fits all. So that connection between the sales leader and the individual to figure that out together, which is a constant anchor to a conversation on performance, we just find is really, really important. And we're still on that journey here in a number of facets of Cleanaway. And when I talk a little later, I'll give you some context around that.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Terence, maybe I'll just go to you as well. I'm sure you've got a wealth of things you can talk about in this subject.
Yeah, look, it's a good point that Chris brings up, accountability in salespeople, which is something I've been dealing with for many, many years. And without going too deep into this, if I go a step back, I'm a big one of developing, realizing, understanding capability frameworks. So, setting people up to success in sales and to perform at the right level starts with understanding what capabilities people have and what capabilities people need to develop. So it is a long-term process to then come to performance. Once you have the capabilities in line, you can then start talking about performance, and certainly then the accountability on performance, clear goals, etc. So it's a fascinating discussion. I'm sure we could last the whole hour on that alone.
Absolutely. And Terence, you've given me a great segue back to Gavin there. So you talked about capability, and Gavin, you've talked about some tweaks to capability within your team and potentially some examples of how that's playing out.
Yeah. Just one point also before I touch on that spoke about earlier is you've got this internal tension in an account manager's mind of everything I sell needs to be implemented and add value. If I sell too much, the customer's not going to get the value. And a year from now, when they renew, if they don't renew, I'm going to be penalized because I've actually going backwards. So we're actually seeing also that transition where we want to right size what customers are buying as well, as much as we can, because we need to show that value. So you've got, like, the clock starts when you start. So in terms of examples, one thing that I encountered, well, I've got quite a lot, but one thing I encountered with a lot of our account managers just 2 days ago, said to me, Gavin, I've been on a very large miner, and I'm really worried because they've got end of life equipment, and if the equipment goes down, like, they're going to have a problem in the mine. And he said they don't want to change the equipment because it's all working fine and it's end of life, but, like, it could crash tomorrow. And he thought about it. We had some workshops and that, and he came back to me in the last day or so, and he said, I've developed a model. So he said, what I've done is I've taken one of these large mines, taken how much revenue they're generating per hour, how much margin they're making per hour, and then I've taken the cost of an outage. If that device switch goes down, what it's going to cost them and how long it will take us to fix it. And then I've put in real data on the probability that that device is going to fail based on it being end of life. And it's got an 86% chance it's going to fail over the next year. And then I've developed my model, and it looks pretty obvious to me. And he's gone to the customer, and the customer's gone all of a sudden from do nothing to this has become like project number one for a mine, because the costs are like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. So that was one example that sort of resonated, really hit home. And I think it comes from also just with the account managers of go and explore. So when we say understand your customer, that means, do you understand, for example, if your customer is an airline, do you understand your customer? And tell me, have you been a baggage handler for one day, for example? If your customer's a mine, have you actually gone and visited a mine and spent like a night or two on site, et cetera, et cetera? Because then you can really understand, and you actually want to understand more than your customer understands. So when you come back to head office, they're actually asking you for information about them and how they actually operate. So that's just one example that's literally came up yesterday, but we have those all the time. And it's about really just connecting. The greatest compliment a customer can give one of my team members is, you've never sold to me. You're actually a partner, you're an account manager, you're actually telling me where my value is and where I should invest $1 if I need to spend, where it would go.
Fantastic example. Not many better examples of how understanding a customer can provide value back the other way. I just loved that one, Gavin. Thank you. Before I move on to the second shift, are there any questions from anyone else who's on the call? No? Plenty more opportunities if you need them, and you can obviously put them through the chat as well, and we'll monitor that. So I'll move on to the second shift now, and Terence, I'm going to ask you about sales mindset. So you've obviously worked with many sales groups. So what I'd love to ask you is, what is a trusted business partner? What does it look like, and how do you become one? So a bit of a three-pronged. So we're talking about mindset here. But what other fundamentals do you need to have in place to be a trusted advisor, which is exactly the sort of person that Gavin was just describing there?
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Ben. And that's a juicy question. And we're probably not going to give it any justice in 10 minutes or so. But,
Absolutely.
Trusted advisor from a sales perspective has been around for a long time. We've always talked about the value add, et cetera, relationship building. And I think I first heard it around the 90s. When I was selling in healthcare. So what is it to be a trusted advisor? Well, it's quite simple. It's to be able to have that relationship with your customer, that they call on you to advise them on information. They want you to lead them through any difficulty, and they just want them to help them to give you the opportunity to take their business to another level. So from a sales perspective, I was thinking about it this morning, Ben, how can I articulate what is a trusted advisor? And I wrote down a couple of competencies, 3 things and I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. So 3 things I think is earning trust, clearly trusted advisor, giving advice and building relationships. Now, they're very nebulous on a human scale. So a salesperson has to work particularly hard to build those three things, and they can do it a number of ways. And again, there are, and I'll go back. So let me jump around a bit. So I'll go back to how salespeople were trained. Initially, salespeople were trained to find out about the customer's needs. That's called solution-based selling. That's moved slightly to consultative selling, where they're more around trying to understand the customer's business. So the first thing a trusted advisor needs to be doing is thoroughly understand the business. Now, it's not just around the customer and their daily operation, but it's around what drives the market forces, which drives the business for the customer, understanding that to an X degree. The other thing they need to understand is what business the customer is actually performing in. So in healthcare, you could say a customer is looking after patients, or a surgeon is, looking after the patients they operate on. But in actual fact, a surgeon is trying to make a living out of their business. So understanding their business, whether it's private hospital, public hospital, what drives the money through those hospitals, what models are used in place. So need a really strong background and depth of knowledge in that area. Also, they need to understand basically what issues are going on in the customer's life and what is the customer doing to handle the many obstacles in their business life. So the research has to be broad and it has to be very narrow. The other part of that too is for them to use that information, and this is the new type of selling we're talking about, is bringing in some really strong insights into the customer's business. So this phenomena called insight selling is, taking more and more of a hold in the selling skills market. So insight selling is basically doing your research, coming in with some insights that maybe the customer doesn't understand or hasn't conceived or hasn't perceived, and then presenting those insights to ensure that the customer thinks that if they don't do anything about these obstacles or problems, then their business is going to suffer. So again, taking the research, bringing in the insights, doing your background stuff, and having a really strong and open discussion with the customer. So they're looking for the opportunity to build a solution together. So rather than coming in and telling the customer what they should be doing, really it's around this consultation approach where they're working out a solution moving forward based on the insights you bring, and they should be pretty strong insights. We talk about building relationships, absolutely, and that'll come naturally if we start solving some major problems. On the back of that, we need some honesty and transparency. So we're not going to solve every problem. We're going to advise them on certain things, and we need to be open to the opportunity, open to the fact that we not be our company, or I can't solve your problem. So maybe there's another solution with another company. So be open and honest about that. And then there's the commitment side of things. So if we're going to help our customer, commit yourself to that task. Now, I know that sounds very obvious from a sales perspective, but certainly in my time in selling over many years, it often isn't the case. Customers are let down by small things, deadlines, etc. So make sure that we do what we're going to say, follow up in everything, and also have a very strong opinion on how we move forward. But that opinion has to be facts-based, and you need to be certainly, you need to have a good opinion which has got, some substance behind it. So, in a nutshell, what I believe the best thing to do now moving forward is for people, one, to better understand the customer, and two, bring some insights to the conversation.
Well, I think you did a pretty good job in less than 10 minutes of going through that, to be honest. That was great.
Yep. So,
and I think it resonated nicely back to what Gavin talked to us about too. So before Gavin, I maybe come back to you, Chris, I'd love to hear what you think about what Terence just said. I think it will resonate really strongly. I think, or I know, similar to Gavin's business, you have some real complexity within your customer base, and getting to understand that complexity and be able to talk to it and be trusted in it would be a big part of the role that your teams play. Do you have anything to add to what either Terence or Gavin said there?
You look, without preempting the final question, Ben, because I might not have anything to say, but Terence, we're reading off the same script here, mate. So
Yeah, we are. Yeah. That's good.
not surprisingly. Look, the only thing I'll say is, part of my ethos and part of our organisational ethos, and I'll give some more context to this in a minute, is, business is complex, but you've got to make it simple. You've got to distill it to the simple things for our people and for our customers, because if we portray this complexity to our customers, I think that undermines trust. It makes it much more difficult to build that trust. So I think that's a key role that we play, particularly as leaders in organisations, because our minds are racing on the 50 million things we can do, right? But in our particular circumstances, we probably distill this in our minds and thought about it for 6 months, and then we put it on our people, and they go, "Where are these people coming from?" And so, trying to build your strategy and simplify it and make it digestible for the organisation in terms of a transformation, I think is just very, very key. And trust me, I get tripped up on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. I'll just add to that. You make a good point, and the one thing I'll say, it sort of follows on. We used to say and talk to salespeople about there should be no surprises for customers. So if you bring in a big surprise, you're going to have a big problem. So that's around controlling the things you can control, making sure the dialogue is open and honest, etc., etc. But that goes with you. Yeah.
Great. Look, thank you. Before again I move on, any questions from anyone here at all, even from Eric or Pete or Mark or anyone else?
Just the one thing I can add.
Please, Gavin. Yep.
Yeah, so I loved what Terence said, sort of spot on, hits all the notes and rhythm of what we would be saying, and also what Chris said. I would say just 3 little things to add to that is our belief that the only thing that holds us back is really time. And there's more opportunities out there with our customers and for our customers to benefit than anything. So we're actually the limiter is time and people. So when we go on this discovery exercise to understand our customer and customer's customer, and education exercise for our customers, what we would be proposing is to then afterwards have a point in time with the customer and go, maybe from my perspective, Gavin, I think these are 10 amazing things that you should be doing in your business or are quite interested. You've got some things. Just because I think it's great doesn't mean you think it's great. And actually getting alignment. So for the customer to go, these are the 2 or 3 things I can put myself behind. I can commit to time, resources, and people, and drop everything else. So just actually get that focus. So back to simplification, which is what Chris spoke about as well. And then I would be as bold to talk about a joint account plan or joint close plan with the customer, and try and bring in finance as well into that. So get your closed circle where you're bringing in your trusted, bringing in people that are on the team from the customer, and then agree on what sort of rhythm you're going to have on that, whether it's weekly. And so you're running it as a project, really. And that for us normally would give us like a 90% plus success rate, but at least you put in the effort where the time is and where there's alignment with the customer as well.
Yeah, Gavin, I love that. I think if we go back to what Terence talked about with trust, advice and relationships, when you're bringing in other parts of your organisation that previously in previous iterations of how people did sales were the hidden faces behind the scenes that you never got access to, bringing that authenticity and openness to the customer and saying, hey, you've got access to everything here. We're not going to hide how we make these decisions anymore. We're going to bring them to you and do it as a trusted advisor, I think is massively powerful. Yeah, that's a really good comment there. Chris, right, without having preempted, let's look at the third shift, which is the role of services. And by that we mean roles within an organisation that aren't necessarily historically viewed as sales roles and what part they can play within that. So for you, Chris, the simple question is, do you see service as part of the sales chain? And I think we know what the answer to that's going to be, but I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that. And then, if so, assuming it's yes, what is that role in the sales chain for them, and how have you helped service people become opportunity spotters, for want of a better word?
Yeah. Well, look, thanks, Ben. And look, I'll just give some business context because, our businesses are different. So there's always going to be different emphasis given the nature of your business. So I'll give you sort of what our focus, which we think we're on a journey here. We think we're heading in the right direction. But it's in the context of the waste management industry is still maturing, and it's maturing quickly. So I would describe that the journey of sort of 10 years ago, with trucks running around streets, picking up rubbish and putting them in big holes in the ground, that was the mindset of 10 years ago. But the whole sustainability push has changed so rapidly in the last few years, and it's going to just continue to accelerate. So that's sort of the business context. But to my earlier point around sort of doing the simple things well, that's one of my ethoses, which is I think doing the simple things well can be understated. But some context around Cleanaway. We have 150,000 customers in one segment. We do 1.6 million services a month. We service about 130 councils across Australia, and we service 5 million households a week. About $3 billion in turnover. And we've got 9 business units that provide a range of services, across different sort of multiple segments. We run sort of at about a 99.3% service rate. But if you look at those numbers in what we call our commercial and industrial space, so even if you're operating at those high levels, that was the peak. We've had challenges like everyone has had with worker shortages, driver shortages, and those sorts of things. But still, that's 13,000 things that go wrong a month. Right, so the ability to deal with that, is really, really, really important for us, and we're still on a journey there. So, as I speak to people, they say, "Are you a B2C? Are you a B2B? Are you a B2I?" And I haven't trademarked this yet, but I reckon we're a B2E. We're a business to everyone, right? So that's the level of sort of complexity in our business and how we organise ourselves in a high transaction environment to provide great service. Now, to your question, Ben, is it part of the sales, ethos, psyche, ecosystem? Absolutely is, and I'll tell you why. As I get around and talk to customers, there's sort of 4 things they pretty consistently tell me across the board. They say, "Chris, just pick up the bin when you say you're going to do it," right? Get my invoice right. And we understand things go wrong, but when they go wrong, we shouldn't have to tell you. You should be proactive, and you should fix it pretty quickly from that perspective. And that's really the foundation of our business. And that's what is at the core of building trust with customers. And whether it be the big end of town, Coles is one of our clients, they say to me, the head of stores says, "Chris, I don't want to talk to you about the sexy shit," right? "Mate, if you're not picking up my bins, I don't want to talk to you," right? So we were through the pandemic. It was ratified really that we were classified as an essential service. For those people that are in Sydney, that will be experiencing the bins on the streets there, and that's a bunch of complex issues, but goes to the heart of Sydney, where we've got a great strategic relationship. But the reality is that's been paused until we get our stuff in order there. That's the world we live in. And so to the point around, how do you move to that value add? You've got to have that strong foundation, and we'll talk to in a second around all the people that and all the systems and the ecosystems that contribute to that. But the 4th thing, which is sort of the rite of passage to value add, I call it, is our customers say, "We want you to do the right thing with our waste." And to use the Coles example again, Coles say, "Yep, we don't want it going into big holes. We want it recycled. We want it recovered. We want to create a circular economy." That's at the big end of town. I've got around the corner from me, Margarita Pizza, where I live. Dominic there, who's the owner, he's a greenie, a passionate greenie, and I don't say that with disrespect. So obviously, as I hit him up to use our services, as I have in my local area everywhere, because everyone's a salesman in our business, right? He says, when I put the cardboard in that cardboard recycling bin, I want you to tell me that it's actually recycled. So at the big and the small, there's growing levels of maturity in terms of that value add, and that's sort of the prize for us, because when we engage in those conversations, then we can really start to create value add in a very customised way for customers. But back to the point around getting those foundations right, it's obvious to everyone on this call, you've got to get customer service rolling right, and that's the obvious thing. Our truck drivers, I was in a run at 4 a.m. in Sydney on Tuesday, they're the face of the company. They're there every day picking up the bins, and they've got a decision to make, which is when someone hasn't put some cardboard in a bin and it's sitting on the ground, do they get out of the truck and put it in the bin, or do they just leave it on the ground? So they play a role. Nationally, our operations and our scheduling people, particularly when we miss services, how responsive they are to that. Our accounts receivable people, as you can imagine, with 150,000 customers, we're constantly monitoring credit. We put people on hold. How do we manage that experience with the customer? Is a critical part of it. And then we've obviously got our sales reps and the disciplines that they're involved in. So, the ethos we're trying to strengthen in our organisation is, and this is the catchphrase, which is, if you're not servicing a customer, you're probably servicing someone internally that is.
Absolutely.
And that's a cultural journey we're on forward. And, you've got to get a lot of things go right to sort of create that culture, systems, processes, leadership, whole range of stuff, which I'm sure everyone, participates in your organisation. But the reality of it is, you get those foundations right, the trust comes. And my experience through my whole commercial career is when you bring that trust, whether it manifests in terms of true partnership, you guys would have experienced this. The customers tell you what you need to do to value add. They'll tell you.
Yep.
And that whole process becomes so much more easier.
They do. They will tell you. Customers will tell you what they need, and it's our job to either find that out or ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to circle back to Gavin quickly. I know, Gavin, within your business, there's lots of roles that are included in the whole sales journey, from conversation all the way through to delivery and then through to renewal. And as we know, renewal is just as an important part of the sales process as bringing new customers in. Is there anything you wanted to add to what Chris said, or some differences in your business,
Yes.
or similarities in your business around
Yeah.
how people without sales or account manager in their title are still heavily involved in that process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that was just like an amazing example, because it was simple and clear, and like, I'm a customer as well.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest compliment you can also get is when people go, your business works so well because it's so easy. And it's easy, it's not really easy, but you make it look easy, and everyone's on the same sort of culture and methodology and approach. So one thing I'll also say is, I think that we haven't really touched on is COVID. And I think when we hit COVID, everyone sort of went back into their sort of shell and worked remotely and that. And the one thing we've had to do on sale and services and customer, and that is actually get people out there to talk to people, because you touched on it as well, Chris, is at the end of the day, we're all people. And no matter what beautiful stuff you have in the middle, you need people to ask people what works and what's wrong and what do you need. And the best way to do that is face to face, if you can. So two things there is, the one is we have probably within the last 5 years have a role called customer success exec. And what happens is, as the software gets sold, the customer success exec comes in, and what they're meant to do is they're measured on getting the customer to actually get value of what they've bought. So, because the day you buy something, you've actually got zero value until you switch it on. So to get the customer to actually start switching on and using the feature, so you've spent this money, now let's actually get it to add value to your business. So that's what the customer success exec does, so that when software comes up for renewal, it actually gets renewed and the customer loves it. And that person is not tied to dollars sold. They really are 100% tied to the success of the customer and getting software actually enabled and switched on. it's one more thing also that Chris mentioned about when things go wrong. So we at Cisco have, I'm going to call it a big red button. So when we have a catastrophic error, issue, problem, whatever, anyone in the organization, from the most junior to the most senior, can push the big red button. That's when all resources from the entire world will come to help solve the problem. And again, back to what Chris said, is I think that's where we actually shine the most, where customers turn around and go, you were actually there for me when things went badly wrong and my rubbish didn't get picked up and things didn't work. So, because I think maybe many years ago, people would run away when there's a problem, but this is actually the big red button to get everybody to run to the problem to solve. So we're trying to do that whole life cycle from sell to customer success exec to renewal manager as well. And then we do a lot of like polling as well with the customer. And then we had advisory boards as well to get them onto that, to then tell us how do we need to transform on our strategy as well for the next 5 years. So getting them into the product development as well.
Awesome, Gavin. Thank you. I do have a question about sustainability that I want to ask both of you, but before I do that, Terence, the whole sales cycle, different roles involved, service people. How would you like to add to the great answers that Chris and Gavin have given us?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Chris. It's a nice insight into waste disposal that I didn't know about. But so if I spent about 15 years in orthopedics, and anyone who knows orthopedics and surgery will know one of the great areas is service. So, you know, we will sell to the surgeons. We will do what we have to do to gain their trust to be able to use our products. But once they're in theatre, then it becomes service. And a service is through a clinical or the clinical people who are not necessarily salespeople, they're part of the sales process, because obviously it's service at the back end of the sales. So when you talk around service being critical, we're at situations where they have to be provided with correct information, correct implants, correct instruments. And we have situations previously where patients are put under anaesthetic waiting for instruments to arrive. And if the incorrect instruments do arrive, and that seems impossible, but it does happen often, then the surgeon has to take that patient off the table again, wake them up, put them back under. And that is, you know, that in hospital 101, that's a no-go. But that happens all too often. So we have to rely on orthopedics, you know, the logistics team to get things right. And in theatre themselves, the clinical person has to be able to plan the operation. So if there's any obstacles, they need to know which way to head that the surgeon may not have encountered before. So the service orientation in orthopedics, I'm not going to say it's life or death, but it gets down to a very one single focus, and that's the patient. So it takes it to a whole new level.
Isn't it amazing that we've got three very different industries here, but the overarching theory behind all of them is the same, isn't it? I mean, you could all swap with each other in these roles and take not very long to get to a position where you could be working in each other's businesses. I'm really keen to hear from anyone before I just can circle back one last time on sustainability, which is a question without notice to Chris, who's already mentioned it though, but also to Gavin. But we'd love to hear from anyone. Any questions for the three guys here who've done such a great job? We've got one arrow. Peter.
Thanks, Ben. I've been interested, I think with a lot of salespeople, they see themselves as relationship oriented first. They see themselves as experts in their product or their service. How have you gone about sort of educating them or sort of shifting that mindset and understanding of the driver of the customer that they need to better understand? Has there been any things there that have helped you in that journey?
If I could give that a go, Peter. So I don't know if people understand the challenger model to sales model, and I'm not saying it's the best or worst one, but one of the areas they have uncovered, and this is research over many years, Peter, that they've identified 5 archetypes of salespeople who are either successful or not in complex sales environments. And the least successful archetype is the relationship builder, interestingly enough. And I won't go into it because we haven't got time. But the thing about the relationship builder is in this complex environment, they don't use that relationship appropriately, and they don't what we call they don't like the constructive tension in the conversation. So one of the things we try to do, Peter, is teach them, how do we take that relationship and start giving them the capabilities to ask great questions, to bring good facts and insights into the conversation, which takes a little bit of time and training, but still utilise that ability to build relationship to move the conversation forward. Because ultimately the relationship builder is about one thing, and that is about making sure that relationship is okay. And that tends to mean that a sales call doesn't move forward very quickly. If anyone wants to add to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, completely agree with what you said. Relationship builder, relationship person for me is like the one person that I'm going to just say don't really want. Because the thing is you'd have someone going, that person's great, they've got a good relationship with the customer, and the question is like, what does that mean? It means like I catch up with them for tea, coffee, go for a drink or whatever. The question I really need to ask at the end of the week is, so what did you do for your customer that made an impact, and what did you do for Cisco that made an impact? And you're 100% right again on, they typically are scared of having not the hard conversation, but really just the real conversations. Terence, this is just not going to work in your business. Let me just cut to the chase. Let's kill the project. Like, you have to have that conversation. So I think we're also doing training on having difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Because I feel that sometimes the relationship people can be amazing people, but if they can't do that difficult conversation or real conversation without being too harsh, like, you're not adding value to me or the customer in that regard. So I think you get the relationship after you've done the hard work. You don't get the relationship and then do the hard work. It's like you've got to first like prove yourself, and then you can have the relationship. It's very easy to have a relationship if you've got money and an expense budget. So yeah, and there was one more thing I wanted to say just on the relationships. Just forgotten about it. Carry on.
No worries. Any other questions?
Sorry, just back. It's such a subtle, just coming back to Peter, it's such a subtle difference. And I personally have been caught out by someone who was an account manager in my team, became highly recommended, had great relationships. The CIO of some of the biggest organizations loved this person, but totally not effective. And it took me a while to work out that last mile that was missing. So I'm just saying I have some empathy and compassion there.
Because I think when you get to that commercial understanding, a lot of salespeople wouldn't know what they don't know, right? Would they? They know what they know already, but they probably don't know enough about the industry or the drivers of some of the things that are in their customers' business. So how do you bring them up to speed with that and show them what good looks like, in a way, so that they are focused even before they have the right conversation or where they should be having the conversation?
They've got to be willing and able, like my matrix of, if I'm unable but I'm willing, then I can learn. But if I'm unable and unwilling, then it's very hard. They have to want to change. Sorry, Ben.
No, not at all. We'd much rather listen to that than that. I was going to ask a sustainability question, but I'm not going to do that because we, as Eric said at the start, we want to make sure we do finish right on time. So before I hand over to Eric to close off, though, I'm going to give you one last question without notice, and that would be going right back to the start of today, where we looked at a title of customer acumen. What would be the one tip you would give to someone in your team who really needed to build their skills in customer acumen and came to you for that advice?
For me, Ben, would be do the research and do your planning.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Terence. and agreed, by the way.
I would say the same. For me, I would just say the words go and discover,
Yeah.
and block off your day or your week to go and do that. Otherwise, it will never happen.
Correct. Yeah.
Perfect. And look, before I get to Chris, preparation is absolute key. I think people who are no good at sales underestimate the value of preparation.
Mm.
Yeah. And Avro.
Yeah, look, hopefully not too many cliches here, guys, but absolutely agree with Gavin and Terence. But as I talk to our frontline salespeople, I say you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and there's a reason. Are you listening, or you're waiting to talk?
Yeah.
So that's what we continue to promote in our organisation, as simple as it sounds. But Peter, to your sort of question, which is, how do you develop the expertise? We try and sort of, there's a level of expertise and industry knowledge that people want, but we don't want people to dominate our customers, if you know what I mean. It's don't go in there with any preconceived ideas. Don't go in there with, bring something in your kit bag in terms of knowledge, but just please listen to the customer. Ask good questions and listen.
Perfect.
Hold on.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Look, I'm going to hand over to Eric, but before I do so, Chris, Gavin, Terence, I want to thank you from me. That was fantastic. I hope everyone on the call got a lot of insight. I'm 100% sure that they did. You're all fantastic people in your fields, and we appreciate it. So thank you very much. And Eric, I'm going to hand to you to wrap things up.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And yeah, it's a delight to hear those stories, and we're so privileged to be working with both of these organizations. And just the last thing from those who are part of our group today, we have published an ebook that sort of summarizes these 3 shifts. And so if you'd like a copy of that ebook, please just type in the chat, send me the ebook. We'll make sure to get that out to you. But as always, we'll end a little bit early today, which is awesome. Give everybody back 90 seconds in their afternoon, which I know everybody will appreciate. So thanks on behalf of all of us at the Lighthouse Group, and look forward to seeing you all again next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thanks,
See you.
Gavin. Thanks, Chris.
Yes.
Well done. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.